Good evening, everybody. It's wonderful to see you here this evening. I'm John Halsey from Flinders University. I'm the Professor of Rural Education and Communities at Flinders, and the entity I work with is the Sidney Myer Chair of Rural Education and Communities, and my colleague, Administration and Research Assistant Myer is with me tonight, and our postdoctoral research fellow, Dr. Aaron Drummond, is an apology because at very late notice he had an illness in the family which just made it the case that he could not be with us. It is, as I've said, wonderful to see you all here this evening. I think you're going to be in for a treat, I hope you are, of intellectual stimulation and ideas. But before we get down to that, I need to do a couple of housekeeping matters. I need to say that's the exit. You can see the green sign there. There's also exit down the back at the rear, and the toilets are out around in the foyer. That, I've been told, is basically the housekeeping for this evening, so hopefully all works well. I'd like to say right at the beginning that we acknowledge the traditional owners of the land upon which we meet. We did have a special person to formally do welcome to country, but that has not materialised. I'm disappointed that that's not the case, but clearly something's occurred, so please understand that and accept the words I have made. I'd like to, in terms of commencing the evening, particularly note and welcome the Mayor and Mayor Steve Perryman and local councillors, the CEO of the City of Mount Gambier, Mark McShane, and also in terms of the welcome and acknowledgements, welcome you individually if I could, and certainly collectively, because as I look around the room there are some familiar faces and others I don't know, but as I've said twice already and will not labour again, it is really wonderful to have you here tonight and to see so many folk gathered for this, the second lecture. In these opening greetings and remarks, I'd like to bring you the greetings from our Vice-Chancellor, Professor Michael Barber, and also the greetings of our Executive Director for the faculty, Professor Richard Maltby, and the Dean of our school, Dr. David Giles, who at short notice had to tender an apology, but the good news, his wife is with us, and really she's a much nicer person than the Dean and a heck of a lot more fun to travel with, so I thought it was a big win actually, but we don't need that to travel back. And but the good thing is I've renewed my contract for a couple of years and then that's the end. Because when you get to my age, you have a little bit of licence, but you've got to be circumspect as well. I also need to bring greetings and an apology from David Swan, who's CEO of South Australian Health. The Sidney Myer Rural Lecture Series, this is number 2 in the series, has been established to try and raise the profile and raise not only the profile but issues about rural communities and rural Australia in general. But with also a focus on, obviously, given the title of the chair that I occupy, education. The mission statement, or the vision actually, which focuses the work of the Sidney Myer Chair, is that vibrant, productive rural communities are absolutely integral to Australia's sustainability and its future. And I think most people gathered here in this room have experienced over recent years, if not some decades, what you might call the rise and rise of metrocentricity, which is a bit of an academic mouthful at this hour of the night, but it basically means when push gets to shove, often an urban and metrocentric perspective on things seems to dominate debate, discussion and policy formation, whether intentional or unintentional. And the perspective that I bring to that, and indeed those associated with the chair, is really that if we do not engage deeply with and focus on rural communities, we're basically trying to operate as a nation with one arm behind our back. There probably are more elegant images, but without wanting to labour the deficit too much, the point of the lecture series is to try and raise the bar about the discussion and the profile in relation to just how central rural communities are to the well-being of our nation, not only now, but leading into the future. And so what we've done, as you know, is to organise a series of 4 lectures. The first lecture we held in the city. There was a little bit of flack for that. John, this is a rural lecture series, and the first thing you do is you have it in the heart of the city. And the response to that was, yes, you're right, and part of the reason was to try and engage persons who are urban-based around some issues to do with rural life and rural communities and rural futures. And our first lecturer was Professor Margaret Alston. And tonight, as you came in, if you didn't get one, please do so. You're invited to take the first of the monographs, and there will be a monograph of this series which will become available, and then the third and fourth, and then we'll bookend them with some kind of a wraparound with a comment, and have it as a contribution to discussion and debate and resources for people both in urban and rural spaces in particular. It's up on our website as well, and by the way, I should acknowledge not only Margaret Alston's work, but in particular Myer's work in pulling this together and having it available tonight. Tonight, in our second lecture in the series, we are particularly, I think, privileged to have as our lecturer George Otero from New Mexico. Dr. George Otero graduated from the University of New Mexico, and George and I have known each other for a number of years. And when I said, George, what are some of the things I should highlight by way of introduction, he said, you could perhaps tell a very brief story of how we first met. It was a forced meeting, because some of you in this room know that in a former life I was a senior bureaucrat in the Department of Education, dressed in a suit and tie and always juggling various policy balls in the air to make sure nothing dropped on the ground and no chink of light got through that would blind the minister and cause him or her to make the wrong decision. Those of you who are senior bureaucrats know exactly what I'm talking about. Anyhow, one of my so-called innovative superintendents said, I've been to Melbourne, John, and I met this guy. His name's George Otero. He was the standout speaker, and I reckon we ought to bring him to South Australia. I said, oh, really? What's he on about? Oh, he's about relationships and middle school learning, and he's just fantastic. And I said, okay. And I wasn't very warm about the idea, and then before I could actually say no, what Mike did was say, I've organised with another superintendent in a rural area to have George do a day workshop, and by the way, could you drive him to Port Pirie and get to know him? And I go, this is not what I need to be doing. So anyhow, I met George and introduced myself and sat him in the Commodore car that I had at the time, and I really wanted to make telephone calls and do stuff like that. And as you'll hear, George, if I'm kind of a word merchant, George is a super word merchant. He started to talk. And I said to him, well, look, if you're going to be talking with me, do you want me to talk to you about the journey to Port Pirie? So I did. And I started to talk and got engaged in things about what he's interested in. And then, of course, he did the workshop in Pirie. And what I had to do was to join in the workshop, which is not what someone wearing a black suit and a tie needed to do about a disciplinary workshop for middle school in Port Pirie. But anyhow, I did it. And from that, what started to cascade out was a fairly long-term professional relationship whereby George and I have worked together over a number of years, me going to New Mexico on occasion, him coming to Australia on many more occasions. This is his 56th trip to Australia from New Mexico. Basically, when George leaves home in Santa Fe, it's just like catching the bus. He just catches the bus to LA and then catches another bus to Sydney and then catches another bus to Melbourne or Adelaide and then just goes to work. That's his life. He also works in Santa Fe. And one of the things that George has done, not only in Australia, in Santa Fe, in other parts of the United States, but in the United Kingdom as well, is focused very significantly on looking at relationships in learning, relationships in leadership, relationships in community. He's written extensively in the area. He's run not just dozens, not just 50s and hundreds, probably thousands of workshops, and for many years ran a big house, a magnificent big house in Taos, where something like 20,000 people went through in community-based workshops over many years, and subsequently now lives in Santa Fe, where he is co-director with his wife Susan in the Center for Relational Learning in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So given George's passion for relationships, given his passion and interest in rural communities, it seemed to me that it would be an ideal thing to invite him to deliver the second lecture here in Mount Gambier, and particularly given some of the engagement I've had, not at a huge level, but at a significant level when it's occurred, with the elected leaders and others of this community around issues to do with the vibrancy of this community, the centrality of learning, the importance of relationships. So, ladies and gentlemen, with those few words of introduction, it's my very great pleasure to introduce to you and formally invite Dr. George Otero from the Center for Relational Learning in Santa Fe, New Mexico, to deliver the second Sidney Myer Rural Lecture. Thank you very much.
You have to shake hands after a great introduction. Thank you. I have a mobile mic because I move around a little bit. Can you all hear me in the back on the lovely sofas back there? I like that location. But it does seem, and we were just talking as the entry about, there's a kind of warmth and friendliness that's really nice, more than nice, being here with all of you. We can feel that. I'm sure you feel that in this community. They're just coming back. I came to Mount Gambier for a 2-day. I'd been here before in 2001, August. And that's 11 years later. And I can't tell you how excited I am to be back, because in that 11-year period, you can already see from the earlier examples how much of the partnerships are happening, how strong you are, and how much stronger you continue to be. But even more important for me coming back is that was trip 7, and this is 56, as John said, which is great because I'm 56 days younger. See, if I finish a whole year, it'd be like those space stories, right? But by that time, a year is not going to make much difference as I continue to move along. So it's very important to me to be here tonight, and in this context John has presented. This lecture to me series is critical. It's not just an evening out, not just another episode of Glee. I love Glee. There's something wrong with me, but I don't know. Maybe it's, you know, that's for my wife and I to talk about. So tonight I want to, from that experience and mentioning with the time, because tomorrow we really get to, for a number of us staying, really explore and share the implications of the lecture. But the lecture is simply, and I want to mention it in the next 4 minutes, tell you exactly what the point of this lecture is and why it's so important for us in rural communities, because the game has changed. And I want to talk about a significant shift, that's what I want to point out with this, in our understanding about education and how it happens. Because we've been living under a myth in the Western world. John, I remember the second part is I was with him and he was speaking to rural leaders This is right before they decided not to divide between rural and urban. However, they made that decision in the bureaucracy. And he was with all the rural leaders, and he was talking about, don't you act like you're on the B team. He says, we're on the A team. Those Adelaide folks, they're on the B team. He knew at that time that wasn't true, but he's a good coach. And tonight, as I talk to you, I want to give you the information, the facts, the principles, the evidence, very quickly, that demonstrates that Mount Gambier is now the A team. That in terms of education, rural communities are the driving force for learning. So we'll explore that so you can see, because I don't want that to be perceived as, what else could you say in Mount Gambier? All right. So I want to pursue that fairly quickly, and I want you to participate with me. But that would be the conclusion, is to understand at the end why privilege has changed to rural communities when it comes to educating the young. Does that assertion or theme make some sense? Because you're going to find this delightful. It's like we finally have recognized across the globe and in country after country what really matters when education is the subject. It's not as well reflected in the Prime Minister's chat yesterday, but confusion is part of change. So, and I don't want to belabor that lately. That's in enough of the papers currently. So positively moving forward, what is the current situation in terms of education, and why is rural now more privileged? So, discourse in education is privileged urban. Urban environments, when we've talked about education in the past, have implied that organizations, places we want to call schools, and corporations could actually provide educational services. It's a corporate mentality. It's called in the papers today economic rationalism. Now, I'm a baby boomer, and I just got reminded that's not going to work. I should have got rich during the 80s. You know what I mean. Aren't you glad you live here and have friends and family, and you talk to people who say they'll take care of you? Because superannuation isn't going to do it. Are you with me? I'm just giving you a quick example. I want to move quicker. But what's happened in the past is educational discourse, the way we talk about education, has been based on economic rationalism and fueled by organizational approaches and resulted in a whole bunch of services. But organizations don't educate your kids. Communities and families educate kids. They just use schools to do that. I want to give you a quick example because I wanted to give international examples. In the United States, they just did a survey, they've done it over the last year and a half, of the 5 strongest universities, Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, Harvard. And they looked at, because it's such a competitive environment, which students who had applied over a 10 to 15 year period did the best. In all 5 of those universities, homeschool kids were the most successful. Yeah, that's worth a pause. Homeschooled kids were the most successful. In the United States today, we have charter schools. We have all kinds of funding coming, and New Mexico's one that's started the model that you're all looking at, baseline funding and then add on for this and that kind of efforts. And in the United States today, with all these innovations organizationally, the fastest growing movement educationally is homeschooling. Rural, urban, neighborhoods, old hippies in Taos, where I used to live. Rich people with lots of money and 2 cars. Homeschooling is the fastest growing. So I could give you more examples, but I can see from most of your eyes you kind of get. And I want to mention it in terms of the social capital, this privileging that's gone to the urban. That's the truth, isn't it, John? And you've been speaking for a long time, and this is a very important point, because now what we know, and I'm going to share with you and have you participate in it quickly, we now know the factors that determine achievement, well-being, and increased life chances. If the medical profession knew as much as we collectively now know about education, they'd be giddy with joy. So we now know what works, and we know it privileges the rural because it privileges relationships, people, and communities. That's who does the education. I'm going to show you. That's what you're seeing in these projects. They wouldn't happen without communities. Now, I'm not saying negative about organizations. I'm saying what rural knows is people make us work. It's people and their relationships that make the city council work. We know because of that principle. You remember the story. I said it 10 years ago. Rural's great. There's good news and there's bad news. You all know this joke. The good news, everybody knows everybody. The bad news, everybody knows everybody. That's now the only news. Can you feel the shift? I want to show you with us doing it quickly, but that's then the point where I started, where I want to end, because if we claim the research that now, frankly, it wasn't there 11 years ago when I was here. This is all in the last decade. This evidence is overwhelming, and it privileges the relational people and communities, which is what rural is. Rural, in that sense, we're moving from global, right? We're moving from a global society, which was urban-focused, and it's resulted in being disconnected. You've seen the cartoons, the families at the beach, and everybody's on their own iPad. You've worked against it yourselves. There's a lovely thing about living in a rural community. You have to spend time with those parents that bore you. So you learn to cope. In urban, you're with me? So what we now have, which is privilege, and we know this works in education, is to rural. Rural means local. Rural doesn't mean not urban. Rural means local. And local is connected. And if we build off the connectedness of local, every research says this, we get a better education. We get a better achievement, better life chances, and more well-being. Well, that's the thesis. Took me a couple minutes more, but I'm kind of nervous about it because I'm pretty excited about it. And we're going to have to academically confirm it. But I think it's significant, and I wanted to pose it because it changes the whole game. So let's play with it just a little bit in terms of the factors that make the difference. And I'll give you a few examples. Then tomorrow we're really going to dig into it because this just changes the game, which I'm pretty excited about. John mentioned where I'm from. I just wanted you to see a picture. Here's why rural is better. Relationships work better when you're face to face. The best way to learn something is to teach it. Mentoring and apprenticeship one-to-one is the best way to learn. So why organize that in urban? You guys your model, every program you mentioned models that. Intergenerational always works better, even with new immigrants. One school that thought they were pretty fancy in an urban area found out that if the Chinese moms who were new, 3 of them came and learned English in the classroom with their kids, Their kids learn English faster, right? So I can give you 1,000 examples of where personal, person-centered, face-to-face, one-on-one is the way we've known how it always works, right? I know that. I had 2 daughters, and I couldn't use the same approach with both of them. They were stubbornly themselves. Do you have any like that? Yeah. So how did we forget that? When did we start thinking young people were just students? That's like strange. But that's what happened in the other mindset when we privileged organizations and the disconnection. So I just wanted to show you where I'd worked before. That man in the middle is Dennis Hopper, because every life is a story, right? And every story makes for equity. Because if you value every story, no story can be better than another. Just different places in the storyline. And kids tell those. One woman I just met in the hallway when I came in, and she said, I just got to tell somebody this story. I had a 5-year-old come up to me today, and she said, I want to learn to play the trombone. Out of nowhere. Wow. A connection, a story, something she could then respond to. How learning really happens. So I lived in this magnificent place where that man's Dennis Hopper. He bought the house. I bought the house from him. He'd filmed Easy Rider. Most of you are way too young to remember Easy Rider. But a few of us are starting to kind of move around a little bit. Get the popcorn out again and kind of remember how life was supposed to be. So he bought the house because he filmed the whole film behind the house. Then we bought it from him. For 20 years, as John said, we ran it as a multicultural learning center. And what we did was let people face-to-face find their way together educationally. It always worked. I had to sell that in 1996, but what luck I came on my first trip to Australia and have been here ever since. So, pictures, stories, letting people be who they are is easier in rural, meaning local, right? You know the cat's name. You know their patterns. You can even do it with 12. Somebody was telling me the other day, who was it, a family where they'd had six pairs of twins? No, some more. Or triplets. Stories like that. Yeah, 3s. And so there were 20-some kids in one family. Now there's a little story book. You could do counting on that one. It's a long book for a preschool, but forget 10. I think most parents would faint as they read and got to that last page, and then she had another set of triplets. Staggering away to say, I think it's time for you to go to sleep now. But, all right, so you're with me. You're with me about how story works because it brings out what you just did. It brings us out. It privileges the personal. It privileges the unique. It privileges our humanity, not our concepts or our ideas or roles. So, another advantage, obviously, of rural. This is where I'm from. I'm from New Mexico. So I'm trying to tell you. Now you see you're laughing. So I brought the picture that really shows it, because that's a cartoon. That's a postcard, my favorite, by the way. But it's absolutely true. I have actually the cover of a Herald Sun edition with the actual skull that was found in Roswell when the spaceship crashed. This part's not being recorded. No, but the issue, and I know the folks. I know them. They're country folks. And when you go work with those teachers and they say, Grandpa says the government came and told us we didn't see what we saw, what are you going to believe? I'm serious. You may have seen the TV episode on it, but What are we going to believe? What do we trust? It's going to be the people we live with and their authenticity and their truthfulness, even if they're wrong, because that doesn't matter. Yeah, so there's factors. We're going to look at them real quickly. I just thought you'd enjoy that for a minute. So I mentioned this whole thing then is based around collectively with this new insight exploring 4 questions. The answers aren't the key in this new approach. Asking these questions together locally every day, every month, that's the key. The answers you come up with at Allendale, at Keith, at the primary school, at the Catholic school. And it wouldn't be too bad an idea for the Catholic and the primary school to talk together, but that might be another century. You never know. Don't want to prejudice it. You don't want to push people too hard till they're ready. So the first question is, what is our educational and moral purpose? That's what communities have to answer. And you have to answer it every day, and it can't just be what you've got posted on the walls. Those values are nice, but it's what are we living every day, because that's what the kids see. I have this lovely quote, copy it tomorrow for you, that just demonstrates the power of this with our kids and our communities. And it says, kids live. I feel funny talking when my head is down. Kids learn what they live. I'll bring it to you. It's a Navajo poem. So if they live with mistrust, they stop trusting. Good enough, I'll get you the one. It's a lovely little one. It's almost like a prayer. So we have to ask this question. This question has been asked in Australia. I just want you to quickly consider it with somebody near you. Don Edgar, who's a famous sociologist in Australia, wrote about the patchwork nation. He anticipated this insight I'm sharing with you, this thesis. And he's written now a new book called The New Child, where he's documented even more what's happening to our children in a disconnected society. They're great books, A New Child, Patchwork Nation, and his second one was A War on Work, where he looked at our work patterns are keeping us separated from each other, dividing families and communities, and requiring more services than we can ever fund, because we've forgotten how to be together. So his work is really good, Australian certified. Okay. And he says the purpose of a school is to help a family educate a child. Agree, disagree with somebody near you? 1 to 10, change it in any way. There's no right answer. Quick look at moral purpose. Just talk to somebody. Agree, disagree, how would you change it? What would Julia say? I got to... So, how many of you were 8, 9, or 10? Just raise your hand. You're saying, I can buy that. Oh, gee, quite a few of you. How many of you could buy it, but you just need to revise it a little bit? Surely there's a few revisions. Yeah, with a big group we would talk. Tomorrow we'll talk a little more, but we do that every day. And given what I just said, it's pretty smart. And what we're going to do next for about 6-7 minutes, we'll confirm that somewhere in this range is where the purpose of schools are, where this privilege to the urban and global has changed. Because it's about our humanity, our relationships, and our communities. That's who educates the young. So this one, I've been working lately, and they say the purpose of a school is to help a family and a community educate a child. Some have changed it even some other ways. Back to the one, it takes a village, takes a community to educate a child. But then they're adding, and without children who are educated, we don't have a community. You see, they've even tied it together, made us dependent on each other. These are useful little discussions, better than just bumper stickers. So that question we have to keep looking at, and there are other ways to do it. Whoops, I don't want you to see that. So here's what we do. We now know, I told you at the beginning, we now know all the factors that determine a child's achievement, well-being, and life chances. You could write those down if you are taking notes. And we now know achievement, well-being, and life chances can't be separated. They're all tied together. That's just the way it works. You've raised some of them, people. I'm feeling better already. That's almost a circuit. We're just going to pause for 30 seconds and meditate on how close that is to perfect. So we now know all the factors that determine achievement, well-being, life chances. We know there are social factors. I'm going to highlight those a lot. We know there are personal factors. Each young person, human, is different. Okay? And we know, this is interesting, back to the home school, we know there is always a school, whether it's at home or somewhere else, or a one room or 19, there's always a school. All communities forever have had a place they educate the young. We also know there are some factors that are there no matter what, they're influential. So we're not going to play with them in the same way. We know gender is always a factor. It just always will be a factor. We know race is a factor. You learn more about that all the time. In the U.S., it's so strong. Like they thought when Obama was elected, we'd entered a post-racial society. Well, that was a sign we had been making no progress whatsoever. You know how they kind of hint sometimes in Australia that women are as equal as men? Most of the women go like, oh God, we've got a long way to go. And then pull out the statistics that prove it, but that's another thing. So race, gender, and what you'd call, I don't want to care about the political correctness, disabilities. You know, like they're having a whole separate set of Olympics now, and that makes sense because people have different physical capacities they're exhibiting. So gender, race, and then this one, undeniable ethnicity. Ethnicity, undeniable. It is now the most important pervasive factor. I'm a New Mexican. I'll always be a New Mexican. I'll always be about the fourth week in my trip dreaming about red chili. I just can't do it otherwise. Ethnicity is so important. You're finding that by honoring it when you have these transition programs for people when they come. Because if they can't be who they are, then there's no way we can educate them. So those are always there. Your task, quickly, is pair up with somebody and just name a couple social factors. You can't be wrong, and I do have stickers for those who need motivation. Scratch and sniff stickers. And I have about 12 taco scratch and sniff stickers. I am absolutely serious. But incentives are another question, right? I feel like a parent now, right? How do I get people to clean the room? Do you remember those days? So social factors, think of a couple here in Mount Gambier area and a couple personal factors. Go, you have about a minute and 3 seconds to just brainstorm. You can't be wrong. You can't be wrong. I got to move. This is that. Now you all were right, and with this size, it's a little hard to hear them all, especially with the time, because I want to allow some questions and answers. And a lecture is a structured period to make a case. That's what this lecture is about, making a case for further dialogue and discussion. So we'll be all interested in what you think about it with your questions and answers. So we know there are social ones. Someone yell out one that's just undeniable, a social factor. Absolutely. And the biggest. Generational poverty is like an extra kick in the rear. Because you can get into poverty, but generational poverty, you think that's your ethnicity. And it isn't. It's just a situation. That's not you. That's just your situation. It's very devastating on achievement, well-being, life chances. You know that. I'm going to show you what the ones are in the categories, because there's worldwide research in the last 12 years confirming this. This is stuff that can't be denied. I'm going to email it to Julia and the group, but I don't think they're going to read it. Okay. Personal factor. What's a big personal factor? You have children. What's a personal factor? Appearance? Fantastic. Of course it is. My granddaughter just went to high school. We start that at year 9 in the U.S., and she negotiated for 3 weeks because she wanted to dye her hair red. And there were long discussions about who would that say you are, and what do you do if you don't like it, and how many of you think she got to dye her hair? This is how it works. All right? You never learn to drive a car till you wreck your father's car. That's John had a Commodore, but he has children, so he's bought a new car. So we know there are personal factors. Now I'm going to show you the research. All of yours fit, because that's where we get personal. And some are more important than others on any one day. And one that's important one week is not as valuable the next week, right? This is very fluid. It's very relational. It's very dynamic. No checklists work. No formulas work. So, those you've listed and this percentage, now your guess is if these add up to 100% influence, this is the big prize, what would you ascribe to social, personal, and school if they have to add up to 100 based on the research, and that's anywhere? Allendale, Mount Gambier High School, the local homeschool situation, Geelong Grammar over just a little ways over the border. What would you say if it adds up to 100% influence, these factors. I'll show you the factors and the percentages. You have 35 seconds to make your guess. We'll take somebody's guess for a big prize. Forget stickers. I have New Mexico flag pins for some bold person. See that? Someone who wants to boldly suggest the percentage? New Mexico flag pin?
45.
Oh, thank you. That didn't take long. And you know you're going to get one just for trying. Gee,
Thank you, Doug.
I love that. Indicates many important things. And by the way, we're only number one in the United States in 2 categories. We're 49th and 50th on all those old categories. Income per person, reading level attainment, all that stuff we've been doing in the old system to determine whether we're okay or not, right? That used to prejudice rural. But we're the finest communities in America because we're number 2 in the things that matter. We have number 1 in 2 ways. One, our state flag is the most popular state flag. I mean, that'll serve you for 40, 50 years. Sitting around the fire, no warmth. You hold that flag to your heart. The other one is we have the most artists per capita of any state in the United States. Like you have here, creative folks. I digress there, I've got to keep moving along. So we had 45, and 10. Anybody within 5 or 10 percentages of that in your guesses? Okay, I'll show you the research. And it's all on the slide. It lists the 4 factors. All of you had them. And then we'll move on to the last 3 questions and continue to do the move. Okay. Yeah. It's more like an egg in this slide, but it's round on some other screens. 40, 40, 20. Geelong Grammar, $30,000 a year. What's the percentage impact? 20%. That's not a good deal. The paper yesterday in the Australian ad, and that research is clear, Catholic schools or religious-based schools, because what do they emphasize? Community, connectedness, humanity and relationships, profound ones, spiritual dimensions. They always get a 2% bump. And they're asking for more money for it. It's tricky business. We know this, and low where the social factors are even stronger, this can go down not to 20 but to 8 or 9%. And the intervention isn't even in school, it's in a program before they ever get to school, where a community loves and cares for people. That's held after school or at other times. Or like 2 schools in rural schools in Australia that decided, since these factors are so important, what if they hired a teacher who worked directly with parents on the developmental index that Australia has developed? Those kids, 5 years later, came into school, cruised through. Because the parents had been partnering with the kids. They just needed some support and some help. Why wait till they get there? And then everybody's miserable. So, very powerful. The factors, those coming tomorrow will give them, and they'll probably be, when they print this up, you'll have all of this. This is worldwide research, pretty well established, as well as you can do. That leads us back to where I started, which is then, how do we move forward, which are the other questions we ask. So what are the underpinning beliefs about family, schools, and communities? that the organization can fix it, that the right reading materials will do it, that if they all sit still for 4 or 5 hours a day, they'll learn more, that winning is better than losing, that making mistakes is not the best way to learn. You tell me what the underpinning beliefs are. They're huge, and they're prejudiced against where we are, which is rural, human relationships and community. Community always works. That's the one on the slide, which is social capital. We really, in rural areas, have to honestly believe we depend upon each other, don't you? If you really get it, it's not just you. It's like the South Africans who say, Ubuntu, I am because of who we are together. You know that here. You know you're only as good as your neighbors. You know that. We have to use that. The kids know it. I talk to them. They feel it. They feel that interdependence and connection to the land and to the animals who are there. And if animals aren't healthy, how can a community be happy? They know climate's a problem. They feel it. So that depth of building the social capital is what now is rich research. Couple quick examples of this power, and I'm just about on schedule. Enough time for a couple of these questions. So building social capital is the way forward. Relationships, social capital. I use capital to get us using a different word than financial capital or physical capital. And it's bigger than human capital. It's this. Social capital is the combined strength and power of community members. It is the trust and reciprocity that develops over time and binds the whole group together. Strong social capital means that people know each other, look out for each other, and come together for social and emotional support. This is measurable. You're measuring it right now. We felt it when we walked in. It's actually something you can measure. Another definition from the General Social Survey, just done here in Australia, defined as interpersonal trust that promotes cooperation between citizens for mutual benefit. These are our kids, every one of them. And every one of them can be successful every day in some way. Do you believe that? I'm starting to feel like a Southern Baptist preacher now. That's my background. So if you're feeling an urge for an amen, just go ahead, shout it out. We'll be here past 9, but it'll be worth it. Okay. So you get the sense of the power of social capital. That's the relationships. That's why relationships matter. And they can be built. Listen to these stories. Oops. Uh-oh. That's not going to work on the machine. We're trying to tape this. So, here's a story. Kimba. You know where Kimba is? Used to be my favorite town. Had that big galah. And then we went through Kingston today. Who can compete with that monster? I have 42 pictures as a result. We couldn't even leave. The guy who runs the store was so great on the social capital because he said it's for sale. And he was very depressed because he said the city council thinks they got to put bitumen and pave it and have formal seats. He says, what's wrong with
Bit of grass and dirt.
a bit of grass and dirt? It's just a big crab. So you could buy it if you like. Kimba, 400 cities, 400 towns, 400 communities in Australia. Everyone chips in to help at Kimba. Social capital, one of the key factors, volunteerism. Kimba has the highest percentage of people volunteering every day. They have the highest reading results. They have a strong community where people feel safe. This social capital is dynamite. You've got it. Rural communities have it. What we want to talk about is how do we use it to educate the young instead of thinking we need another organization, curriculum, standards, or whatever. Standards are fine. People will pick them out. They know good work when they see it. And we want kids to do not only good work, but good works. A good work is something that serves you and you learn, but somebody else benefits from it too. That's what we need in a community, not individual achievement. This survey is available. Communities that have high social capital have high educational outcomes. Rural communities are natural for social capital. There's more I could give you. This story of quitting smoking is contagious. If you're around people who don't smoke, and that's the interest, and even over a generation or two, you have a better chance of not smoking. They say it works with weight. I haven't seen the evidence in my own family. We are contagious beings. The model I gave you earlier used to say, what did we used to say were the barriers to educational success and opportunity? You knew it here. We used to pick on ourselves in rural Australia. What did we used to say? You need money. That would be a barrier if you didn't have money. We need to prepare for school. We need to be prepared for school. Like in New York City, where they pay $4,000 for their 4-year-olds to learn how to pass the entrance exams. Now so many New Yorkers pass that, they pay $4,000 more so the kids can learn how to pass the interviews, since there's more who've passed the exam and the interview determines it. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. 3, lack of motivation. No future. Why would anyone want to go to school if it's irrelevant? John had a great term in the car today. He said to somebody on the phone call that there was a whiff of irrelevance. A whiff of irrelevance. Whiffing through our communities. Walk into a year 8 classroom and don't see if you can't whiff a little irrelevance kind of moving around. So I have to go on these. And students who cannot connect education to what they want to do with the rest of their life. But we now know in rural you can connect it tomorrow. This is the heartland. Everything they do, they're citizens now. You know with these programs you're starting to do, they work because they connect. We don't need this old model. Then in one of the books Malcolm Gladwell does on outliers, he says the people in Rosetta, the Rosettans, live a long time and they don't have heart attacks. But they're not like rich. They're rural folks. They're in Italy. They looked at how they visited one another, stopped to chat and to say Italian on the street, or cooking for another in their backyards. They learned about the extended family clans that underlay the town's social structure. They saw how many homes had 3 generations living under one roof and how much respect grandparents commanded. Are you with me in the storyline? They live longer. This is it. Social capital. You build it. Achievement, well-being, life chances go, and you got tons of it here because you can see it and feel it every day. You can trust it. You have high social capital when you know who it is in your neighborhood you never want to talk to again. At least you know that. In urban communities, nobody knows, so they're afraid of everything. I'm serious. Back to what we're talking about as we move. So we know these non-school factors matter. The research is huge. Let me give you 2 examples of social capital, and then I have to hit the last slide where we're heading, know the territory, and then take a few questions. And if you want to keep playing, tomorrow's the time. But my whole purpose in the lecture tonight was say, let's get off this game that doesn't work anyway. It's not the 21st century educational model. Rural education is the 21st century education model because it's based on people, relationships, and communities and families. And the school coordinates and helps serve all of that. So, social capital I've mentioned, how you do these. Our other questions were why relationships are the key. I just mentioned that. With the social capital, you know it, you can build them face to face. I have a lot of other stuff on that some other day. How do we expand, improve, and build new relationships to educate better? So what is the path forward? Now that we can privilege relationships, communities, families. The way forward is this. I can't believe how well these slides go together tonight. I'm so pleased. Here's the territory. Because now we know that it takes an effective family, it takes an effective community, and it takes effective classrooms. Now the government is only focusing on effective classrooms. That's good, but it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. I just gave you the research. It can't be. Why would we only attack one thing that matters? An effective family, bottom line, unconditional love. Tomorrow I'm going to share with you all the factors you know. Effective families exhibit warmth and firmness. They set some boundaries, because if mom and dad don't expect the teacher and the church to get by with it. And how do we support each other in doing that? This isn't a deficit model. It's about effectiveness, caring, helping each other, supporting the growth and development of the people in our community. Effective communities. What makes an effective community? The social capital, connections, trusting each other, working together, not liking someone, but knowing you depend on them, buying something from their store anyway. No, I don't know. Okay? Saying hello to Uncle Tom, even though you hope this only happens once a year. You know, effective communities. It's like the porcupine story, where we get closer and then the quills hit us, we move apart, and then we move closer because we need to be warm because it's cold. And here's this amazing dance. It's called community, living in community, social capital. We can build it. And then effective classrooms. We now know what makes effective classrooms. The quality of the relationship between the student, the young person, and the adult who's in the room with them. We also means it's effective if there are other adults there. We also know it's more effective if they're not in the classroom all the time. Hallelujah. So, effective classrooms. John Hattie, now world famous for his research. He gets a little sticky because he's only interested in classrooms. And, you know, we kind of move beyond that in the 21st century. But he said, what makes an effective student-teacher relationship? Warmth. And this were the highest payoffs in achievement. Warmth was one. Empathy. Not firmness, empathy. The teachers get to be empathetic. Parents just have to be firm. I'm serious. And then non-directivity, letting kids choose and manage their own learning. How hard can this be? How are you going to fund that? Those three, that's the territory. The ways we get there are what we're going to look at more tomorrow because I'm at my time, but we've been finding these the last 10 years. The biggest bridge then is to get parents, communities, and schools working together and speaking the same language. So we've introduced the idea of natural pedagogies. How many parents in here, even some of your teachers, you go, I wouldn't go to the high school ones because I had no idea what they were talking about. And I'm an educator. So how do we get a language that allows us all to take responsibility? We've said, let's reintroduce what all communities have used forever, natural ways of learning. And there are 6, and I'll end with that. Play, it's the natural way, and if you're not playing, there's your excuse. Because if kids don't see you playing, they got no interest in the future. That's what we'll be like when we get older. That's not a good idea. Play, games. Games are the biggest. And everything, the research says if kids are playing a version of a whole game, they always learn more. In Australia, they just did with 125 families, back to the formula, and families who played a board game 1 hour, 4 weeks in a row, saw rises in sportsmanship, literacy, numeracy, social skills, enjoyment of each other's company, taking turns, and cooperation with siblings. No school in here is going to offer that guarantee. Are you with me? 1 hour a week. Or in schools in Geelong where kids don't read, they read to, and I'll finish with this, they read to dogs. And their reading scores go up and stay up. They go up 2 levels reading to dogs. Because if you want to learn something, teach it. And dogs just love to be read to. What a resource. Are you with me? We haven't touched the surface. Play, games, story, which I mentioned earlier. Story narrative is the way to all learning. It's how you teach everything. You tell a story what your grandma did, or when you did it and it worked, and when you came to it. And then they say, blah, 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 blah. And then you tell another story. And the dance goes on. It's how humans learn. Why have we given up on these natural ways? Play, games, story, art, the best in the world. Art is huge. Dialogue, real discussion. They're teaching philosophy with 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds all across Australia. They can do this. They can think together. And then ceremony, presentations, celebrations. Just those 6. What parent can't do that? What community doesn't do it already? What school isn't a better school in the community with it? Well, I've gone over my time. I want to leave about 7-8 minutes for questions. I hope that plants some of the territory. Tomorrow we're going to look in depth. I've tried to make my case, and John's going to facilitate some question and answer. Thank you for your time.
Well, we have got, before I do the formal thanks for George, time for questions. I couldn't see your faces, I could just feel you behind me. But has someone got a question they'd like to put to George? Here we go. Can you make it? Sure.
George, can electronic media be used to build social capital, such as things like Facebook, or do they not work?
Yeah. No. They're wonderful. I carry them around. I have an iPad, an iPhone, a computer. I never use them, but I just feel better. Here, let me tell you how it works on it. I'll give you the answer because I brought this one too. In Silicon Valley, just so you know how it works, there are 2 choices. I'll give you 2 beautiful examples, research-based. In the Silicon Valley, where all the computers are invented, Microsoft, Macintosh, all of them there, they started a charter school because you can start schools. They made only one new rule of how they'd learn in community at that school: no technology. Because they already had it. It's already there, pervasive. What they didn't have is face-to-face, a chance to figure out what we're going to do when we don't like each other. I mean, those parents knew what they needed their school to do. You decide what you need yours to do. Here's another research. Kids who watch TV too much doesn't work, does it? Because they get disconnected and they can't put it together. But they found if kids even watched an hour of TV and you spent 5 minutes discussing that show with them, huge gains. So we just have to get smart. Why ignore ways that make life easier? We use them on our farms, we use them in our kitchens. If we can make it more learning that stays and that kids are motivated and it's relevant, use it. I mean, kids now can put together presentations that would twist our brains, and they can do it on concepts you wouldn't believe. Let's do it. 3-minute movies, whatever. That's me. Another question.
Is there another question? There is? Oh, here we go.
It's an observation as well as a question. Adolescents spend much of their time trying to be as unlike their parents as they can.
Yes.
And then when they hit their 20s, they realise that mum and dad weren't such bad folks after all. Yeah. The reason I mention that is the concept of alienation.
Yes.
Because there has to be a role for alienation in education to bring them away from what they already are before we bring them back to what they want, as we want them to be.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And what builds that? What allows alienation to be there and us all not to get too nervous?
Having that
protective background, relational trust, the research is clear. Unconditional love, still sitting down and eating, knowing we're angry at each other, but I remember a famous guy, but he made sure every night they just gave a little peck of a kiss each night and said, we'll try again tomorrow. We know how to do this. I mean, what dollars do those? So yes, because to take away alienation is to take away human development. Kids have to hate you. That's called being a teenager. And then maybe they'll like you later, maybe they won't. Somebody else.
Is there another? Is there any more? Are there any more? Here we go, yes. We've got time for a couple more.
If you've got any, I hope...
I just wondered, you say effective families. How do you engage families who experience of schools and education were very poor?
Yeah, great. I'm so glad you asked that one.
This is the question George just loved, you see. Okay, so just hope you got Vegemite sandwiches in your bag or something.
Yeah.
So,
No,
but we'll limit him. We'll limit him.
We do it right now. We've been doing it. John taught me how to do this. He came over to New Mexico and worked with us for years, and we did discovery conversations. And we went into communities, and instead of telling people, we get them together in a circle, and we said, not what do you think about your school, but what do you love about your community? What do you want more of here? What makes you stay here? And out of that, people generated ideas, and they felt powerful as families because they felt a strength base to it. We do that now in schools, in low SSCS communities, any community. We get together 8 parents, 8 students, and 8 staff, and we spend just 1 hour together talking, getting to know each other, talking about what we love about the community and school, and what do we want for our kids this next term. It's that easy. Because families are ready to play. They just don't want to go to any more meetings. Does that help? So we have hundreds of approaches. You do them naturally. Tomorrow we're really going to look at those because that's huge. And that's where we should start. Because if families don't feel effective, you're playing a deficit game anyway, right? You're just babysitting or offering the security. We can do this if we work together.
George, we have a question down the front here.
Can you talk to me a little bit about teachers and educators having empathy when we often come from very different places?
Yeah. Who's the we on that one? The teachers or the kids and the teachers? Well, everyone. Yeah. Well, yes, I can tell you how that works. Is you have to be yourself, able to stop punishing yourself and judging yourself. And I work with educators all the time because we care a lot. So we really set ourselves up for have to blaming them. And then we start subtly blaming ourselves. So I get teachers, I work with them all the time. You can't be empathetic till you're free from your own assumptions. We got to do this. We got to cover this. What will happen if we don't teach that? How could you be empathetic when you're under your own terror regime? And then kids can find each other. And what's the other side? What develops empathy more than anything else? Just go into you call it prep. Just go into a prep classroom for 10 minutes. They are so amazing. They walk in, their lives could be a mess, and they just look at you and tell you the truth. Like you smell bad, but you know what? If you can't empathize with that, then you just need therapy, and you can immigrate to the U.S. because everyone has to have a therapist that lives in the U.S. So, does that help a little bit? I don't want to be glib.
How much did it help?
Yeah?
It helped.
She's smiling.
Yeah, I know she's smiling. A lot of people are smiling, but we're just working out how much it's helping.
Well, my question back, any question you have about the thesis I presented, I'd like to know if that at any level simply makes sense.
Well, can we use mathematics? We're saying to what extent is it congruent with them, or do you...
Any way you want to phrase it. Do you think we really can play a different game in the 21st century, that we've been playing the wrong game, and that the privilege now goes to rural communities because of the relationships, the families, and the schools? Does that make sense? Back in the back.
Yeah, back in the back. Okay.
Good. I hope that be the question. Here's why. Because you are... See, Mount Gambier is... When I came 12 years ago, rural communities survive based on these principles. Let me give you one in your own country. I come from New Mexico. We have the largest number of Native people living percentage-wise. We have huge numbers of Hispanic people over 400 years. We have the largest number of illegal immigrants who couldn't get education and don't speak English. What they have is each other and these relationships, and they educate their young anyway. They just keep getting told they're not doing it right. You see? You keep getting told you got to score a certain way on year 3 and year 5 tests. And ask any parent, they say, the kid who took the year 3 test ain't the kid who took the year 5 test anyway. So we've been deceiving ourselves by having the wrong mindset. The one I'll end up with that is one we've used all the time, and we'll do them tomorrow. We'll look at these mindset challenges. What was the best way, the top way to get around in the 1850s, I think it was? It was the Cutty Shark, the fastest sailing ship on the planet. That was the top. That was the way to go. Like Geelong Grammar, or another private school, or whatever name you'd give. And then what happened? Steam. Whole new game. I'm just trying to suggest, if we'd stop for a minute and look at what we already have, we have all the resources we need to educate every kid to success every day. And John's been talking about this, and all of you, for a while. Every day, what do kids see as something possible? Every day, what's something they can celebrate as a citizen? You know, in projects all over here, Pitchy Ritchie Railroad, along the river, up the road, they come by and sell them jams and so on. The kids organize it. Every day they feel like a contributing member of their community. You don't think that builds a future? So we've just deceived ourselves with the wrong storyline. Because you already do this. I mean, indigenous communities have been doing it for 50,000 years. Someone just told them it wasn't the right way. Fair enough? I mean, I'm willing to argue and discuss that tomorrow. Somebody else, a last...
Maybe last one. Here we go. Gentleman over here. Do you want a mic? You got a big voice, have you? No, you haven't got it. You got a bad...
They want that microphone.
What can governments, and mainly federal governments and stuff, do to help this stuff apart from throw money, which is really what they're...
You can do what this city council does, which is sponsor and support community groups getting together to work for kids. The stories I've already heard here. This meeting tonight is sponsored by the city, not done by the city. State governments, you have them. You have the best state government in the world. I know for Redmond fans that's probably not true, but I work all over the world. This document just came out, and in the next 18 months, it says children and young people are the center of everything we do. The new Department of Education is not education. It's health, youth development, every other service. They say if achievement, well-being, and life chances are tied together, we have to form partnerships with effective families, communities, and schools to do that. It's the most innovative, progressive vision of education I have seen anywhere in the world. And in the next 18 months, you're all going to do that. That's what governments do. They set policy, set out a vision, and then they let people work on it, and they get out of the way. Does that help? Thank you. If you haven't seen this document, it's good. It's pretty impressive. And
Are we done? Is there... Sorry, was there one more? Okay. Well, it now comes my turn to summarise. I just better check the agenda. Well, yes, we're there, George. So first of all, I'd like to formally thank you very much for a lecture. Now, as you know, as you've probably realised, when you invite Dr. George Otero to do something, you never quite know what you're going to get. You never quite know. You kind of know the broad framework, right? And then it unfolds before you. It becomes a work of art. And it becomes an invitation. It's an invitation. When I first met George, I was totally disarmed by the word play, right? Because I was the black-suited Thai bureaucrat who'd been pretty successful in getting up the hierarchy and managed to keep most things going, at least I thought so. And in comes this person and the constant invitation to play, to explore, to start a conversation. And if you want a bit of conceptual jargon, to create a space and to see what might emerge, because we as people communicate and work together. We're not perfect. He's not arguing for perfection. He's not arguing for rejection of everything that is of a kind of an instrumental, quantitative kind. What he's arguing for is kind of like a tipping of things upside down and inside out, and placing right at the centre relationships and relational approaches to rethinking and reconceptualising, if you like, reimagining what it is that education in a community and with a community and for a community and about a community might be. And so what we have had tonight is it's an invitation, it's an opportunity to hopefully to challenge some thinking, to maybe begin to create a space for other ideas to emerge. And because we knew, or at least I knew, I don't want to be arrogant about it, but I knew this would likely cause some disruption and disturbance, as well as some affirmation, as well as maybe some rejection, I don't know. We thought we'd have the workshop tomorrow morning, and about 120 of you, or thereabouts, are going to come along tomorrow and roll the sleeves up and start to unpack what some of this stuff might really mean and what it might mean for us as educators and members of community. So George, for that presentation, for that lecture, for that advancement of a thesis, a suite of fertile ideas, for that stimulation of the imagination and the opening up of possibilities, and the injunction to think of rural as fertile, non-deficit, imaginative places and spaces, warts and all. I would like to thank you very much, as in a formal way, as the Sidney Myer Professor of Rural Education and Communities. I'd like to thank you on behalf of Flinders University as well, and trust that the journey you've launched some people on is in fact productive and fertile. And with those few words, I'd like to present you with this gift, small token of appreciation. It's gift wrapped and it survived the journey down in a plastic bag. Thank you very much indeed from all of us.
Thank you.
Secondly, this event would not have happened without Maria's fantastic assistance, Maria Van Breda. If you could, I think a round of applause for Maria would be fabulous. And in particular, it definitely wouldn't have happened, not only because of the Lifelong Learning Committee here, but Barbara. And I don't know where she is. She won't catch my eye at the moment. Where are you, Barbara? Barbara, would you just come down here, please? Now, I said to the Chief Executive, this is going to totally embarrass Barbara, but if you kind of could clone a Barbara, you would. I think you would, anyhow. As a, you know, who knows? Does anybody know Barbara? Yeah. Well, I've only met Barbara. I met her once when she came out to pick me up at the airport in a battered-up Volvo, and basically said, "Get in, sit down, shut up, and don't ask too many questions." So I did. But I'd like to say, Barbara, on behalf of the chair and of Flinders University, a huge vote of thanks for the organisational work to bring this together at this end. It's kind of worked just seamlessly and apparently effortlessly, but I know you've done a huge amount of work and there's a team with you. I thank you for the wonderful jazz group in the foyer, for the refreshments, for the eats, for the ambience, and for the kind of like the energetic but graceful way in which you just move around and do stuff. And the fact that nothing is too much trouble and you approach every challenge with the glass definitely half full and with that distinctive, what I've come to think of as distinctive, and quite attractive actually, twinkle in the eye that says, "I'll do this," but you are actually a pain in the ass. So Barbara, on behalf of everybody, thank you. And we know there's a team, and I only have one Peugeot 407 station wagon, but all the other bottles are in the back. All right, beauty, she says. So thank you very much indeed. Two final notes. One is, first of all, a very, very sincere thank you for coming. We will have this out in a monograph form at some stage. Maria's great joy in life now is to translate what George said into something that mildly resembles called a narrative or a story or a monograph, right? We're using the word monograph in, as some academics in the room know, somewhat with a degree of elasticity. But we want to capture what he said and have it available for you. It'll be on our website and we'll also make available hard copies. And of course, if you want to continue the conversation, please do so. George has a website at the Centre for Relational Learning in New Mexico. We have one, etc. And he's here in Australia so often. He's coming back in November. He'll be around somewhere. You'll probably bump into him. And the last thing is we are having the third lecture. And I don't expect you all to come, but if you'd love to come, you'd be most welcome. Potentially, a lot of negotiation yet will be in Darwin. And potentially with someone, yep, we're just moving this thing around. It's like a moving feast with one of the researchers with the CRC for Remote Economic Participation, and it will be looking at life in rural and remote communities post-mining. That's the broad thing at the moment. Huge, huge issues, huge challenges, and also opportunities, and that's what we're going to try and explore. I was nearly going to say mine, pardon the pun. So, I think that's it from me. Again, thanks for your participation. Thanks for the energy you put into tonight. Thanks for the thinking you shared. Thanks for the conversations you had with the people alongside you. I invite you, I encourage you to continue it, and particularly to see it as a gift, because gifts are not like things in the consumer society. They actually are meant to be passed around, and as they're passed around, they do their work and magnify and grow. That's the nature of a gift. Thank you very much and good evening.